Today we are going to discuss the gross anatomy of heart. Yesterday we had discussed about the coverings of the heart, that is the pericardium, the various layers of pericardium, including the fibrous pericardium and serous pericardium. The serous pericardium with its two layers, the external parietal layer, which is adherent to the fibrous pericardium, and the inner vessel layer of serous pericardium, which is adherent to the heart as such, forming the epicardium. Heart, as we have discussed, is lying in the middle mediastinum in the thoracic cavity within the pericardium. It is basically a hollow, conical in shape, a muscular organ which is covered with pericardium. It's hollow, obviously, so for the blood to line this, the muscular organ because it has to pump blood to various parts of the body, and it's conical in shape, the apex below and base above. This is the location of the heart within the fibrous pericardium, which we had discussed yesterday also. It's lying just posterior to the body of the sternum and anterior to the middle four thoracic vertebrae. That is thoracic vertebra 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. Anterior to this pericardium is anterior mediastinum, posterior to this is posterior mediastinum, and this is lying within the middle mediastinum of the thoracic cavity. If you look at the surface, once we remove the in situ, we remove the pericardium covering the heart on the sides of the lungs covered with pleura, but we can identify towards the right side some irregular dark colored area, which is right atrium. Then we can identify a small groove over here between the right ventricle and atrium, that is coronary sulcus or the atrioventricular groove. Then we further go towards the left. Again, we can identify a groove in this region, which is interventricular groove, which is separating the two ventricles, that is right ventricle from the left ventricle. And then we can also identify an end, which is the apex, which is because heart is conical in shape, so clearly towards the left and the fifth intercostal space, we can identify the apex of the heart. Above the heart, we can see the emergence of the great vessels, ascending aorta from the coming from the left ventricle and the pulmonary trunk from the right ventricle. Based on this, let's see what are the surfaces and borders of the heart. Apex, we have already said, lies in the left fifth intercostal space around 9 centimeters from the sternum. And the base, one can imagine base to be lying somewhat here. That's not a fact. The base of the heart is posteriorly located, where yesterday we had discussed about the sinuses of pericardium and we said, okay, over here somewhere there's a oblique sinus lying in relation to the left atrium. So this region, which is formed by the left atrium and partly by the right atrium, forms the base of the heart. The base is not this, the base is lying posteriorly. If you look at this, imagine a conical structure. Let's imagine the surfaces of the heart and borders of the heart. This is the apex. A cone which is open over here, which you can see. This is the surface inferiorly, which is in relation with the diaphragm. If you remember, we discussed that the fibrous pericardium is attached inferiorly with the central tendon of the diaphragm and the left muscular bone. this surface of the heart, which is in relation to the diaphragm, or which is actually the inferior surface, is called the diaphragmatic surface. The base is posterior. Posteriorly lying in relation with the posterior mediastinal surfaces. We discussed yesterday also, this is lying in relation with the two principal bronchi dividing esophagus, thoracic tract, as I guess system of veins, etc. The apex going towards the left side, okay, and then the left pulmonary surface towards the left lung, right pulmonary surface towards the right. Then there's a borders, a right border, a left border, an upper border, which is obscured because of the presence of aorta and the pulmonary tract, and an inferior border. So just imagine the heart, conical structure like this, a base lying posteriorly, a diaphragmatic surface lying towards the diaphragm, apex towards the left. Coming from the apex, going upwards is the left border. On the opposite side is the right border. Then there's a right pulmonary surface towards the right lung, a left pulmonary surface towards the left. What we see on the surface, once we remove the pericardium, is the anterior or the sternocostal surface. And posterior to this is the base. You don't go by this line diagram simply because heart is a three-dimensional structure. It has some dimensions, anteroposterior, transverse, vertical. So this is the anterior surface, behind this is the posterior surface, and in between definitely are lined the some of the chambers of the heart. So based on this picture, you can imagine what we can see over here is the anterior surface over the sternocostal surface, which is lying in relation with the sternum and the left coastal cartilages, etc. Once we remove the sternum, we remove the coastal cartilages. This is what, after removing the pericardium, we can see. What we can identify over here is the right border of the heart. One can see it's being formed by the right atrium. Then one can see the inferior border coming from the lower end of the right border going towards the apex of the heart. This is the inferior border. Then a left border being formed mainly by the left ventricle and partly by the left auricle. Then in between, in the center portion, you can identify the right ventricle. So, after opening the thoracic cavity, what we are going to see is the sternocostal surface of the heart, and then we can identify the pulmonary trunk coming out of the right ventricle and the ascending aorta present over the obscure. Ascending aorta, you can see it coming more towards the right side. It's just, it has appeared from the inside of the left ventricle and it's obscured. That's why we can't see. It's obscured by this pulmonary trunk coming out of the right ventricle. So you can't see it directly coming from the left ventricle on the surface. Because the direction of this is oblique, deep to this pulmonary trunk. So this is what we had seen. The sternocostal or the anterior surface of the heart after opening the thoracic cavity and removing the fibrous pericardium interiorly. What about the surface which is lying in relation with the diaphragm, where the fibrous pericardium was attached to the central tendon and the left bone of the diaphragm? So the surfaces, the part of the heart in relation with the diaphragm or the diaphragmatic surface are going to be two ventricles. Atria are superiorly fixed. They are not going to come in contact with the diaphragm. So mainly it's going to be the left. This is the diaphragmatic surface. This is the posterior view of the heart, showing the left atrium, the right atrium, and below that, this is atrioventricular groove in which the pulmonary sinus is lying. So this is also called the pulmonary sulcus. So below this surface is the diaphragmatic surface. This is mainly formed by this left ventricle and partly by the right ventricle. So this was right ventricle, left ventricle forming the diaphragmatic surface. Separated from this diaphragmatic surface through this pulmonary sulcus and the atrioventricular groove is the base or the posterior surface, which is more or less formed by the left atrium and to some extent by right atrium. This posterior view of the heart, one can identify the two pulmonary veins, superior and inferior of the left side and superior and inferior of the right side. So in total, 4 pulmonary veins opening into the left atrium. One can see the aorta, the arch of aorta posteriorly visible because it's oblique in direction. And one can see the division of the pulmonary trunks. And one can see the two vena cavas, the superior and inferior, opening into the right atrium, and further to the right of that, the right auricle, the structural appendage of the right atrium. Now we had identified the grooves on the anterior surface of the sternocostal surface, the atrioventricular groove or the pulmonary sulcus, and one more groove, the anterior interventricular groove, just to the right, 3 to 4 centimeters to the right of the apex of the heart. This demarcates the boundary between the two ventricles. Posteriorly, you can identify this posterior part of atrioventricular groove, which is also called the pulmonary sulcus. This groove is lying at the boundary between the atria and ventricles. Anterior surface also, this is lying the boundary between the right atrium and the right ventricle. Posteriorly also, you can identify the place between the left atrium and the left ventricle over here, and over here right atrium and right ventricle. So this is basically a circular groove or the pulmonary sulcus. This demarcates the boundaries externally between the atria and then one can identify the posterior part of interventricular groove also in this region, separating the left ventricle from the right ventricle. So let's look at these various relations and various structures present in relation to the heart and the interior of the heart. Before that, let's see, this was the apex lying in the left fifth intercostal space, around 9 centimeters from the median plane, and slightly below and just medial to the left neck pouch. The left lung and pleura separated from the anterior thoracic bone. This, when you have to visualize the apex, you have to retract the left lung and pleura so that you can see. Over here is the cardiac notch of the left lung. There's another depression sort of thing which you can identify as just medial to the apex, that is incisura apices corpus. Basically, it's nothing, just where the anterior interventricular groove is continuous posteriorly with the posterior interventricular groove. This is the point where the two ventricles are separated. So it's seen as a small notch kind of area or a small depression, just medial to the apex, 3 to 4 centimeters medial to the apex. So this is where just medial to the slightly below and medial to the midline and the fifth intercostal space, around 9 centimeters from the median line. lies the apex of the heart. This the surface projection of the heart, where it's exactly lying in the body. You can see it's lying behind the body of the sternum, and the apex is coming just below and medial to the neck. The base or the posterior surface of the heart is the most fixed part and quadrilateral in shape, formed majorly by the left atrium and partly by the right atrium. If you look at the boundaries of the base, it's going to be bounded superiorly by the pulmonary trunk, bifurcation, and sphere vena cava. On the right side, it's going to be these. The right severe and inferior vena cava margin coming because partly right atrium is also, 1/3 of right atrium is also coming into the base. And on the towards the left side, the boundaries are formed by the left pulmonary veins, and inferiorly the posterior part of this coronary sulcus or the atrioventricular. So this whole is the base. There's a part of the left atrium coming in the base. This is the part of the right atrium coming in the base. Okay. Now, what are going to be the relations of the base? Firstly, we had discussed yesterday posterior to the fibrous pericardium where it was lying. So, it was lying in relation to some vertebrae. So, some aorta, some venous structures, some esophagus, etc. The bronchi, the right and the left. So, all those structures are going to form the posterior relations of the heart, which is basically the base of the heart. So, this is are going to be, if we enumerate, the fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth thoracic vertebra, that is middle fourth thoracic vertebra, the descending thoracic aorta, esophagus with its nerve plexuses, the two principal bronchi coming from the right and the going towards the right and the left lung, the pulmonary veins, definitely they are going to open into the left atrium, so pulmonary veins will form the posterior relation, the fibrous pericardium, and lying in relation to the pulmonary veins and the left atrium, a weak pericardial sinus. Apart from that, the azygous and the hemiazygous veins also will form posterior relation. The base of the heart, which is formed majorly by the left atrium and partly by the right atrium. Now, what are going to be the features of the inferior surface or the sternocostal surface of the heart? Which we have already seen. The inferior part of the atrioventricular groove or the coronary surface, in which we'll find the right coronary artery, which is definitely heart is supplied by right and the left coronary arteries. So we'll see these arteries in the interventricular grooves as well as the atrioventricular grooves. So, in the atrioventricular groove towards the right side, between the right atrium and right ventricle, we'll see the right coronary artery. But in between the two ventricles and the anterior interventricular groove, we'll see a branch coming from the left coronary artery and a great cardiac vein. And this region we call it as anterior interventricular groove. As well as the posterior interventricular groove is concerned, we find this in the diaphragmatic surface. This is the posterior view of the heart. Over here, you can see the base or the posterior surface of the heart over here, and this is a diaphragmatic surface of the heart. When you hold the heart in anatomical position, you put this surface, the diaphragmatic surface, on the palm of your left hand. and the apex lying between, you just adapt your thumb, apex lying between the index finger and the thumb. Just spread out your palm with the fingers together, adapt it, and thumb away from the index finger. So, in the left hand, you put the heart like this, and the apex and the space between the index finger and the thumb, and the diaphragmatic surface formed by the two ventricles resting on the thumb. On the left surface, you can see the left component of partly the left component of the coronary sulcus or the atrioventricular groove. It's mainly formed by the left ventricle and partially by the left auricle. Left surface of the heart, which has come in contact with the left mediastinal surface of the left lung. So it's mainly formed by the left ventricle, and in the upper region, an appendage of the left atrium, that is the left auricle. So left atrium is not coming on the left surface, but the right atrium is coming on the right surface. On the right atrium, what you can see is small conical muscular projection whose margins are quite notched is the appendage of the right atrium, which is called the right atrium. On the inner aspect of this is the regular muscular network. And on the side of this is this right atrium, which is mainly forming this right surface and the right border of the heart. And this, between the superior vena cava opening and the inferior vena cava opening, on the right side, externally, you can see a small groove, which we call the sulcus terminalis. That is on the right margin of the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava. You just connect by an imaginary line. Over here, you will find a small sulcus which is connecting, and visible externally, small depression which we call the sulcus terminalis. This is basically forming the boundary between the right auricle and the right atrium interiorly, which is muscular component and the smooth component, thereby forming the vista terminalis on the inside. When we open the right surface of the heart, from this sulcus terminalis that is cutting through the boundary between the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava right border, there is a posterior view. We have opened inside. So there is the vista terminalis, which we are going to see inside, which was seen as a groove over here on the external aspect of the heart. The smooth part is separated from the rough part by this muscular ridge, which we call the crista terminalis. This entire rough part is derived from the atrium proper, or the primitive atrium, and this is quite rough because of presence of lots and lots of muscular tissue over here, which we call the musculi pectinati, and they're quite visible with the naked eye, musculi pectinati. The smooth part of the right atrium is derived from absorption of sinus venosus. The right atrium, you have already done the development of the right atrium, so you understand that it's derived from the primitive atrium as well as absorption of the sinus venosus. So the smooth part is the derivative of sinus venosus, and the rough part by the primitive atrium or the proper. If we look at the interatrial wall of the right atrium, we can see a small depression between the two atria, because on the right side of this is going to, on the left side of this is going to be the left atrium. So from the right atrial wall, what you can see in the interatrial septum, a small depression which we call the fossa ovalis, which is just the remnant of the septum primum, which was interatrial septum developing during intrauterine life. And all around this, we can see a margin, which we call the limbus fossa ovalis, which is again the derivative or the remnant, which we can see of the septum secundum. So, septum primum forming the fossa ovalis, and remnant of septum secundum is seen as limbus fossa ovalis. So openings in right atrium again, and enumerate question of the exam. The superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava definitely open into the right atrium. Then the venous drainage of the heart. Venous drainage of the heart mostly comes and drains into the coronary sinus present in the atrioventricular groove. That's why we call that as coronary sulcus also. A big vein present on the posterior aspect of the heart, coronary sinus, that also opens into the right atrium. Then small veins which are draining the heart or the atria, which are called as venae caudes minime or the Sebacean veins. They also open into the right atrium. Right atrium is the venous side which receives all the venous blood and transmits it to the right ventricle through the right atrioventricular opening or tricuspid opening. So that is another opening in the right atrium. Apart from that, there are some anterior cardiac veins lying on the anterior surface of the heart, which directly open into the right atrium, and the right marginal vein. Sometimes an oblique vein of Marshall also opens into it. So superior vena cava, inferior vena cava, coronary sinus, venae caudes minimi, anterior cardiac veins, right marginal vein, right atrioventricular. In structure and which is going towards the coronary trunk. So this region is also called the infundibulum. Infundibulum of the coronary ventricle. This smooth part and the rough part are separated by a clear muscular bridge, which we call the supraventricular crest. So what we can see, there's an inflowing rough part in which you can identify which is a well-defined muscular bridge. What are these muscular structures called on the inside of the rough part of the ventricle? They are called trabeculae carneae. Trabeculae carneae are of three types: the papillary muscles, the bridges and ridges. The ridges are just simple elevations of muscular tissue attached to the cardiac wall. The bridges, like the bridges, attached at the ends and free in the middle portion. So, ridges completely simple, like ridges you have seen at elsewhere in the body in relation to the bones. They are attached throughout the cardiac wall. The bridges attached at two ends and the free in the middle portion. Then there is another important component of this particular tonic, capillary muscles. Capillary muscles are like the pillars. They are free at the apex, but attached at the basal end with the cardiac wall of the ventricle. So these are the capillary muscles. One side they are attached to the cardiac wall, free at the apex. Base is attached. Definitely, you can see some fibrous tissue attaching to their apices. We'll come to its structure later on. But at the moment, just remember capillary muscles like pillars attached to the ventricular wall, bridges like bridges only attached, like you've seen fibers attached at two ends and free in the central portion, and the ridges, which are simple elevations of the muscular tissue. What we saw at the apex of these capillary muscles are some fibrous, fine, glistening, collagenous tissue or the cords, which we call them as chordae tendinae. These chordae tendinae are basically attaching these capillary muscles to the valves, the tricuspid valve. These are fibrous in nature, collagenous cord-like structures coming from the apex of capillary muscle and going to the tricuspid valves towards the ventricular surface. That's why they are called chordae tendinae. Since that it's a tricuspid valve, so there are going to be three capillary muscles: the anterior one, which is largest, a posterior one, and the septal capillary muscle, which are smallest. Septal definitely towards the interventricular septum, posterior posteriorly located, anterior largest, anterior. Now tricuspid valve has three cusps. Name itself suggests tricuspid, three cusps. So these capillary muscles attach to the cusp of this tricuspid valve through these chordae tendinae, which are adjacent, which are going to attach to the two adjacent cusps. So basically, the fibrous tissue is not contractile, but the muscle is. So contraction of these will help in opening of the tricuspid valve so that the blood from the right atrium reaches into the right ventricle. And we had seen that there was a supraventricular crest which is present between the rough part and the smooth part of the right ventricle. Lower down, this becomes continuous with a band of muscular tissue between the two ventricles, which we call the interventricular band. On this band, another band of muscular tissue is visible in the wall of right ventricle, going towards the anterior capillary muscle, which we call the moderator band. This is responsible helping in the conduction of the impulse. Supraventricular crest continues with this interventricular band, which is connecting it to the anterior capillary muscle, which we call the moderator band. Now, we are going to the components of whether tricuspid valve or bicuspid valve. For that matter, bicuspid valve present between the left atrium and the left ventricle. The It has two cusps, and the tricuspid in relation to the right atrium and right ventricle. There is going to be a ring all around the 12 annulus ring, and the three cusps coming over here towards the right ventricle. The rough part being towards the right ventricle because of the attachment of these fibrous cords, which we call the chordate tendinae and papillary muscles. This chordate tendinae from the three papillary muscles don't go and attach directly to the cusp, single cusp, but they are multiple bands going to the two adjacent cusps. If you look towards the surface of the atrium, this valve, whether it's tricuspid or bicuspid, the surface towards the atrium is going to be smooth. The blood from the right atrium is going to enter into the right ventricle. Very similarly, from the left atrium to the left ventricle. So this surface is smooth. But towards the ventricle, the surface is going to be rough because of the attachment of chordate tendinae between the apices of the papillary muscle and the cusp, the three flat-like cusps of this valve. The smooth part of the right ventricle is also called the infundibulum or the conus arteriosus. It's directed upwards so that the blood from the right ventricle can enter into the pulmonary trunk. Let's come to the structure of left atrium. We didn't see left atrium in relation with the left corner of the heart or on the sternocostal surface. Only a small appendage, roughened, notched, dark structure coming over here, the left auricle. The left atrium is visible on the posterior surface of the heart, and it forms a major portion of the base of the heart. If you look at the shape of the left atrium, externally it's almost square, and in the inside also the dimensions are almost same in all directions, so it's called cuboidal in shape. The wall of the left atrium is going to be thicker as compared to the right atrium for the obvious reason that this is going to have oxygenated blood. Oxygenated blood coming into the left atrium through the four pulmonary veins, two from the left side superior and inferior, two from the right side superior and inferior. If you look at the anterior surface of this is the left atrium, it's mostly smooth wall. Why? Because it was developed from the absorption of the pulmonary veins. Only some part, that is only the left auricle, which is the appendage of the atrium, which was formed from the atrium proper, is muscular. There are no muscular tissue present in the wall of left atrium. The muscular pectinate are seen only in the left auricle, not in the left atrium. It's formed by the absorption of four pulmonary veins, very smooth. Apart from that, some small veins also open into the left atrium, which we call the venae portis minima. This left atrium communicates with the left ventricle by the left atrioventricular opening, which is bicuspid valve. So openings in the left atrium are four pulmonary veins, the venae portis minima, and the left atrioventricular orifice. So three openings, four of pulmonary veins, venae portis minima, small dot like openings. You can see opening into the wall of the left atrium, which are draining definitely the venous blood from the wall of the left atrium. And then the blood ultimately goes into the left ventricle. Now, what is the structure of the left ventricle? Structure of the left ventricle is very similar to the structure of the right ventricle. The shape is conical, but the muscular component is much more than the right ventricle, and its wall is also quite thick. Like left atrium was thicker than the right atrium, very similarly, left ventricle wall is much thicker than the right ventricular wall. It's almost 3 times the thickness of the right ventricle, this left ventricle. Obviously, it needs more muscular tissue because it has to pump blood with pressure into the aorta so that the distribution of the oxygenated blood can take place to the body. The inflow part of the left ventricle is rough. If you call it ventricular proper also, it is very similar to the right ventricle trabecular carne, that is ridges, and papillary muscles, which are more numerous, stouter, and more integrated. The outflow part, very similar to the right ventricle, also outflow part was smooth because the blood from right ventricle was going into the coronary trunk. In this, the blood is going into the aorta, so aortic vestibule again is smooth. The number of papillary muscles in case of left ventricle are going to be 2 because there are 2 cusps present in the valve, bicuspid valve. This is called between the left atrium and left ventricle, and both anterior and the posterior papillary muscles will attach to the both cusps of the atrioventricular valve, left atrioventricular valve, which is also called the bicuspid valve, because bi means two cuspid. The right atrioventricular is called the tricuspid valve. Now let's see what are the various valves guarding the orifices. Bicuspid valve on the tricuspid valve. We have discussed tricuspid between the right atrium and right ventricle. Bicuspid between the left atrium and left ventricle. Apart from that, there are semilunar valves present in the major vessels, that is around the pulmonary trunk and the opening of the aorta. What is the structure of these semilunar valves? They have 3 cusps. There is a surface which is facing towards the ventricle, whether it's pulmonary trunk or the aorta, and there is a surface which is facing towards the vessel wall. The surface facing the ventricle is going to be rough, and facing towards the vessel wall will have small outpocketings over here. So basically, the blood goes from the ventricle into the vessel, and when it has reached the vessel, it's filled in this region. The blood, when the ventricular systole has finished, it's the diastole, the blood tends to come back. So it goes and lodges in these sinuses, thereby closing the valves, so that the blood cannot reflux back from the pulmonary trunk or aorta back into the ventricular chamber. So if we look at this, there's a cut section through the various valves of the heart. This is the bicuspid valve or the mitral valve between the left atrioventricular orifice with an anterior and a posterior cusp. Between the right atrioventricular orifices is a tricuspid valve, which is one anterior, one posterior, and a septal cusp. As far as the pulmonary trunk and the aorta are concerned, there are three cusps present over here. And both these, the pulmonary trunk valve and the aortic valve, with one valve having the aortic valve having the one anterior and the two posterior cusps, and the pulmonary valve having one posterior and two anterior cusps. That is right and left on either side and lateral. There is a structure of the bicuspid valve in which you can see the papillary muscles, the apex of the papillary muscle attaching to the cusp to the caudate tendinae, and both the papillary muscles attached to both the cusps. The contraction of the papillary muscles helping opening it, and then relaxation closing the. As far as the structure of heart is concerned, it consists of three coats: the epicardium, the myocardium, and endocardium. Epicardium externally, that is basically the visceral pericardium only, which was attaching to the muscular wall of the heart. The myocardium, the muscular tissue proper of the heart, and the endocardium, the inside lining of this cardiac wall, is called endocardium. You may see that there were four major openings present in relation to the interior of the heart: the pulmonary opening, the aortic opening, and apart from that, the tricuspid and the bicuspid openings. Now, these openings are responsible for passage of the uninterrupted blood. So, the valves of these need to be patent, not become incompetent. So, there is a fibrous ring present around these orifices. The four fibrous rings, the pulmonary ring, the aortic ring, the both rings are going to be at right angles to each other, and these fibrous rings are all around the valve and attaching to the wall of the heart. The two aortic and the pulmonary rings, the two major rings in relation to the great vessels of the heart, are connected by a fibrous septum, which we call the tendon of infundibulum. So, in this, you can just see the diagrammatic representation of these valves. This is the pulmonary orifice, this is the aortic orifice, and they are attached to the cardiac wall by the fibrous ring. And both pulmonary orifice and the aortic orifice are connected with, again, a fibrous structure which we call the tendon of infundibulum. Posteriorly, the two left atrioventricular orifice and the right atrioventricular orifice again are surrounded by this fibrous ring, and these two are also connected with the aortic fibrous ring by another fibrous structure which we call the Pericardium fibrosum dextrum. So, a tendon of infundibulum connecting the aortic and pulmonary orifices, aortic with the right and the left ventricular orifice connected by Pericardium fibrosum, and all these orifices openings are surrounded by the fibrous ring which are present, and they are basically enclosing these openings, and they are also called the fibrous skeleton of the heart. Skeleton, generally we think about the bone. It's not the bone, it's a fibrous tissue. What is the use of this fibrous tissue present in the heart? They help in providing the attachment to the atria and the ventricular muscles. They help in supporting the valves of the heart, whether valves of the bicuspid valve, tricuspid valve, or the aortic and the pulmonary valves, and helps in keeping them patent. They are supporting all around the boundaries like the ring of the valves. They also provide attachment to the roots of the aorta and the pulmonary trunk, which are emerging from the heart. Pulmonary trunk from the right ventricle, aorta from the left ventricle, where they are attaching to the wall of the heart. So at the side where the roots of these structures are there, they get attachment. What about the conducting system of the heart? You know, heart is capable of automatic rhythmicity. Basically, wall of the heart, apart from the simple cardiac muscle, has specialized cardiac myocytes, which have the capacity for initiation and conduction of cardiac impulses. As far as the atria are concerned, we have seen that their structure is different. As well as the ventriculars are concerned, we have seen that their musculature is also separate. The conducting system between the atria and the ventricles is the only muscular connection. Atria can conduct, ventricular can conduct, but their impulses need to be transmitted from the atria to ventricles, so that ventricles can push the blood into the whether aorta or the pulmonary trunk. So the conducting system is going to be the only muscular tissue. The three major components of the conducting tissue of the heart are SA node, which is also called the sinoatrial node, the atrioventricular node, the atrioventricular bundle of His. Let's see where are they located. The SA node or the sinoatrial node is also known as the pacemaker of the heart. It is located in the upper part of the sulcus terminalis. The blood supply of SA node is by right coronary artery. Even AV node is supplied majorly by right coronary artery. The atrioventricular node is smaller than the sinoatrial node. It is located in the right side of interatrial septum, just above the opening of coronary sinus, which you can locate it from the inside opening, the right atrium. This is also supplied by right coronary artery, and anteriorly and inferiorly it continues with the atrioventricular bundle of His. If you look at this open right atrium, this is the location. This is the right side of the heart, left side of the heart. The whole atria and the ventricular system are open. This is the right atrium, right ventricle, left atrium. Left ventricle, left atrium is not open in this surface. So you can see the SA node is located externally at the upper end of sulcus terminalis, which was basically connecting the right border of the superior vena cava and inferior vena cava. On the inside was crista terminalis. Between the smooth part and the rough part, at the upper end of this is SA node. The AV node is located in the region of the interatrial septum, just below the opening of the coronary sinus. Anteroinferiorly, this AV node continues with the AV bundle of His. This passes to the membranous part of interventricular septum. If you remember, interventricular septum has a membranous component and the muscular component. From the membranous part, it reaches the muscular part of the interventricular septum and divides into two branches, right and left. Obviously, the impulse has to start from the SA node to AV node, from AV node to two ventricles. The impulse has to go. So, AV node is located in the interatrial septum, just above the opening of coronary sinus on the right side. So, from there, it reaches the interventricular septum from membranous part and then to the muscular part, dividing into right and left branch, that is going towards the right ventricle and the left ventricle, so that the impulse can transmit. From there, right side, it reaches to the anterior capillary muscle of the right ventricle, and from anterior capillary muscles, it breaks up into a network of subendocardial Purkinje fibers, which ramify in the wall of right ventricle, thereby transmitting the impulse. The left bundle of His is along the left side of interventricular septum. It divides into two sheets, the anterior and the posterior sheets, which ramify in the wall of left ventricle. If there is any problem in this conducting system of the heart, that can cause the arrhythmias or the irregular heartbeat. So, three important components of the conducting system of the heart: the SA node, the AV node, and the atrioventricular bundle of His, with its two muscular bands, the right and the left. So, impulse from the SA node to AV node to bundle of His, with its two muscular part, one going towards the right, another towards the left, so that the impulse from the SA node that is present in the right atrium, which is also called the pacemaker of the heart, this SA node, can reach to both the ventricles, and ultimately rhythmicity of the heart is maintained. Any questions?